Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little disturbing. A time when beauty came with a body count, and vanity was literally poisonous. We're diving into the bizarre, grotesque, and downright dangerous beauty rituals throughout history. Forget the Instagram filters and Korean skincare routines. The truth is your ancestors were doing things to look beautiful that would horrify a modern dermatologist. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up as a wealthy Roman woman in the year 150 CE. The good news, you can afford the finest beauty treatments. The bad news, those treatments might kill you slowly. Your morning routine begins not with coffee but with urine. Yes, urine. Because Roman physicians swear it whitens teeth and brightens skin. The ammonia burns your nostrils, but beauty demands sacrifice. Your servant, a teenage girl from Gaul, carefully applies a face mask made of crocodile dung mixed with mud from the Nile. It's supposed to tighten your skin and give you that coveted pale complexion. But mostly it just smells like a swamp and makes your eyes water. Next comes the lead. Your face powder is made of white lead carbonate, ground so fine it feels like silk against your skin. You don't know that with every application you're slowly poisoning yourself. The lead seeps through your pores into your bloodstream, causing headaches, memory loss, and eventually madness. But right now, all you care about is how porcelain pale it makes you look in the bronze mirror. Your lips need colour, so you reach for your favourite rouge, made from crushed beetles, mercury, and more lead. The bright red stain looks stunning against your ghostly white face. But every time you lick your lips, you're ingesting toxins that will slowly eat away at your brain. Your teeth, already loose from lead poisoning, clatter slightly when you speak. But that's fashionable too. Dental hygiene isn't really a thing, and black teeth are considered aristocratic. Time for your hair. Your natural brown locks aren't exotic enough, so you bleach them with a mixture of goat fat and beach ash. The chemicals burn your scalp, leaving angry red welts. But blonde hair means you're sophisticated, worldly, like those Germanic slaves everyone admires. If the bleaching doesn't work, you'll simply shave your head and wear a wig made from the hair of those same Germanic captives. Your eyebrows need attention too. Unibrows are all the rage among Roman socialites. So you carefully draw a thick black line connecting your brows using antimony, a toxic metal that will slowly blind you. But beauty is temporary, and apparently so is your vision. Now for the final touch. Your skin needs that healthy glow, so you apply a foundation made of chalk mixed with white lead and a touch of arsenic for that subtle luminescence. You don't know that arsenic causes organ failure, you just know it makes your skin look like moonlight. Welcome to Roman beauty standards, where looking good meant dying slowly and fashionably. So you've successfully poisoned yourself with lead, mercury and urine. Congratulations. Now it's time to remove unwanted body hair, Roman style. And it's about to get medieval, literally. Roman women weren't allowed to have body hair anywhere. Smooth skin was a sign of civilization, refinement and wealth. So every few days you visit your local depilatory specialist, a woman who makes her living pulling hair from places you'd rather not think about. Let's start with your legs. The process begins with a thick paste made of resin, tree sap and hot wax. This mixture is heated over an open flame until it's molten, then slathered onto your skin while still burning hot. You grit your teeth as the scalding wax sears your flesh, leaving angry red welts. But that's just the beginning. Once the wax cools and hardens, your attendant grabs the edges and rips it off in one brutal motion, taking hair, skin, and sometimes small pieces of flesh with it. Blood isn't uncommon, neither are infections. The open wounds left behind are treated with salt and vinegar, which burns like liquid fire but supposedly prevents disease. For more delicate areas, they use a different approach. Bronze tweezers heated until they glow red hot are used to pluck hair one follicle at a time. The smell of burning hair and flesh fills the room as each strand is individually torched from your body. The pain is excruciating, but Roman women endure it with stoic pride. If you're wealthy enough, you might afford the luxury of having your hair removed with a mixture of pitch, pine bark and cypress resin. This black sticky substance is applied hot then allowed to cool before being peeled off like a scab. The result is smooth skin, but also chemical burns that take weeks to heal. Some Roman women prefer the gradual approach. They mix crushed hedgehog spines with powdered viper ash and rub this abrasive paste into their skin daily. The tiny spines act like sandpaper, slowly wearing away both hair and flesh, until their skin is raw, bleeding and hairless. For facial hair removal, they use a combination of hot coals and cold bronze. A red hot coal is held close to the face to singe off unwanted hairs while a cold bronze blade scrapes away the burnt stubble. The smell is nauseating and the risk of permanent scarring is high. But beauty demands sacrifice. And if you're really dedicated to the cause, you might try the pitch method. Hot pitch is poured directly onto the skin, then ripped off once it hardens. This technique often removes more than just hair. It can take off entire layers of skin, leaving behind permanent scars and discoloration. The most extreme Roman women underwent a process called burning, where heated metal tools were used to permanently destroy hair follicles. This early form of laser hair removal involved pressing glowing iron rods against the skin until the follicles were literally cooked. The pain was unbearable, and many women fainted during the procedure, but those who survived had permanently smooth skin. Welcome to Roman hair removal, where smooth meant scarred and beauty meant surviving the treatment. You've successfully burned, poisoned, and mutilated yourself in pursuit of Roman beauty. Now it's time to perfect your complexion, and that means diving into some truly revolting facial treatments. Your daily skincare routine begins with what Romans called the miracle ingredient: nightingale droppings. Yes, bird feces. Fresh, warm nightingale excrement is carefully collected each morning and mixed with powdered pearls to create a luxurious face mask. The ammonia in the bird waste supposedly tightens pores, while the calcium in the pearls adds luminosity. If nightingale droppings aren't available, you'll settle for sparrow dung mixed with honey. This paste is smeared across your face and left to dry for hours. The smell is overpowering, but Roman physicians swear it prevents wrinkles and age spots. You sit perfectly still, breathing through your mouth, while insects buzz around your dung-covered face. For deeper exfoliation, you use a scrub made from crushed oyster shells mixed with vinegar and mouse brain. Yes, mouse brain. The tiny grey matter is believed to contain youth-preserving properties, so you massage it into your skin with circular motions, ignoring the nauseating texture and smell. Your weekly facial involves something even more disturbing: a mask made from human placenta mixed with donkey milk. Fresh placenta from recent births is ground into a paste and applied to your face. The theory is that the life-giving properties of afterbirth will rejuvenate your aging skin. You lie still for hours with someone else's birth matter slowly drying on your cheeks. If you're dealing with acne or blemishes, you reach for the snake oil, literally oil rendered from snake fat mixed with crushed beetles and earthworms. This black, greasy mixture is rubbed into problem areas where it supposedly draws out impurities, but mostly it just makes your skin smell like death and attract flies. For age spots and discoloration, you use a bleaching treatment made from pigeon dung mixed with boiled urine and crushed snail shells. This caustic mixture burns like acid, but Roman women believe it will fade dark spots and create an even skin tone. Instead, it often causes chemical burns and permanent scarring. The most luxurious facial treatment involves bathing your face in fresh blood. Usually lamb's blood, though some wealthy women prefer human blood from gladiators. The warm crimson liquid is splashed across your face and left to dry. The iron in the blood supposedly nourishes the skin, while the warmth improves circulation. If you're feeling adventurous, you might try the live leech facial. Small blood-sucking leeches are placed directly on your face, where they attach and begin feeding. The theory is that they'll remove bad blood and toxins while improving your complexion. You sit motionless for hours while dozens of slimy creatures writhe across your skin. For the ultimate in luxury, you bathe your entire face in mare's milk mixed with ground pearls and powdered gold. This expensive treatment is reserved for only the wealthiest women. The milk supposedly softens skin while the gold adds a subtle shimmer. But mostly, it just makes you smell like a barnyard and attracts stray animals. Welcome to Roman skincare, where natural meant nauseating and glowing meant literally covered in excrement. Now that your face is properly marinated in feces and blood, it's time to work on your teeth. Roman dental hygiene makes modern root canals look like spa treatments. Roman teeth whitening begins with urine, again. But not just any urine. You need the freshest, highest quality urine available, which means collecting it warm from young, healthy donors. Usually slaves or servants are paid a small fee to provide their morning waste, which is then used immediately while still steaming. You swish the warm yellow liquid around your mouth for several minutes, gagging on the ammonia taste but determined to achieve those pearly whites. The acid in urine does actually remove stains, but it also dissolves tooth enamel, leaving your teeth soft, porous, and vulnerable to decay. For deeper cleaning, you use a toothpaste made from powdered mouse brain mixed with crushed cuttlefish bones and honey. The gritty paste is rubbed into your teeth with a cloth, leaving your mouth tasting like dead rodent but supposedly killing bacteria and preventing cavities. If your teeth are severely stained, you might try the charcoal treatment. Burned bones, usually from cows or sheep, are ground into powder and mixed with vinegar. This black paste is scrubbed into your teeth with rough cloth, leaving your mouth looking like you've been eating coal. But Romans believe it absorbs toxins and brightens enamel. For loose or aching teeth, Roman dentists recommend chewing on warm sheep brain mixed with honey. The theory is that the fatty tissues will strengthen your gums while the honey fights infection. You spend hours gnawing on chunks of grey matter, trying not to think about where it came from. The most extreme dental treatment involves having your teeth filed down with metal rasps, then polished with powdered bones. This procedure is performed without any pain relief while you grip the arms of a wooden chair and try not to scream. The sound of metal scraping against enamel is enough to make grown men faint. If you've lost teeth, which is common given Roman dental practices, you can have them replaced with teeth pulled from the mouths of slaves or executed criminals. These foreign teeth are hammered into your jaw with bronze nails and secured with gold wire. The constant pain and infection are considered normal side effects. For bad breath, Romans recommend gargling with fermented fish sauce mixed with mint and rose petals. This putrid mixture burns your throat and makes you vomit, but supposedly kills mouth bacteria and freshens breath. Instead, it usually just makes your breath smell like rotting seafood. The wealthy sometimes opt for gold teeth, not for beauty, but because gold doesn't decay like human teeth. Molten gold is poured directly into tooth sockets, where it hardens into permanent replacements. The agony of having liquid metal poured into your mouth is indescribable, but the results last forever, and if all else fails, you can simply remove all your teeth and replace them with dentures made from ivory, bone, or even wood. These primitive false teeth are held in place with leather straps and make eating nearly impossible. But at least they're white. Welcome to Roman dentistry, where cleaning meant poisoning and treatment meant torture. You've successfully destroyed your teeth with urine and mouse brain. Now it's time to perfect your hair. And Roman hair care makes modern chemical treatments look gentle. Roman women are obsessed with blonde hair. It's exotic, foreign, and therefore highly desirable. But achieving that golden colour requires a chemical process that would horrify modern hairstylists. Your transformation begins with a mixture of goat fat, beech ash, and rancid butter. This foul-smelling paste is slathered into your hair, then heated with hot coals held inches from your scalp. The ammonia in the ash burns your skin while the fat goes rancid in the heat, creating a smell so nauseating that servants often vomit while applying it. But you endure the stench and pain because blonde hair means you're sophisticated, worldly, and wealthy. If the first treatment doesn't work, you escalate to more extreme measures. A mixture of sulfur, quicklime, and lead is rubbed into your hair, then heated until it smokes. The chemical reaction literally cooks your hair from the inside out, leaving it brittle, damaged, and sometimes falling out in clumps. But the surviving strands are gloriously blonde. For those willing to go even further, there's the arsenic treatment. Ground arsenic mixed with wine and honey is applied to the hair, then heated with burning coals. The arsenic bleaches hair to a stunning platinum colour, but also poisons anyone who touches it. You wear gloves when styling your hair, and servants are warned not to breathe too deeply while working. Some Roman women prefer the gradual approach. They wash their hair daily with lye soap made from human fat and ash. This caustic mixture slowly strips away natural colour while eating through hair follicles. Many women go bald from this treatment, but those who survive have gorgeous blonde locks. If chemicals don't work, you can always resort to wigs. Made from the hair of Germanic slaves, these blonde wigs are incredibly popular among Roman socialites. The hair is often still attached to pieces of scalp when harvested, adding an extra element of grotesque luxury to your beauty routine. For darker hair colours, Romans used different toxic mixtures. To achieve black hair, they use a paste made from crushed leeches mixed with vinegar and squid ink. This black sludge stains everything it touches, including your skin, scalp, and anything nearby. But the resulting jet black colour is considered very fashionable. Red hair requires a mixture of henna mixed with animal blood and crushed beetles. The blood provides iron, which reacts with the henna to create vivid red shades. But it also attracts flies and makes your head smell like a butcher shop. The most extreme hair treatment involves actually burning your hair while it's still on your head. Hot coals are held so close to your hair that individual strands catch fire and burn away, leaving behind a shorter, singed style that's supposedly very chic. The risk of setting your entire head ablaze is high, but fashion demands sacrifice. For hair removal, Romans prefer hot pine pitch. This black sticky substance is heated until molten, then painted onto unwanted hair. Once it cools, it's ripped off, taking hair, skin, and sometimes flesh with it. The pain is excruciating, but the results are perfectly smooth skin. And if you want to prevent hair from growing back permanently, they use a treatment involving heated metal combs. These bronze implements are heated until they glow red hot, then drag through your hair. The intense heat destroys hair follicles permanently, but also leaves behind horrible burn scars. Welcome to Roman hair care, where beautiful meant burned and blonde meant potentially fatal. So you've bleached, poisoned, and burned your way to Roman beauty. Now it's time to learn about makeup. And Roman cosmetics make modern chemicals look like organic health food. Your makeup routine begins with foundation made from white lead, mixed with chalk and arsenic. This deadly mixture is ground into the finest powder, then mixed with water or wine to create a paste that covers your natural skin tone completely. The lead slowly accumulates in your system, causing brain damage, memory loss, and eventual death. But your complexion looks flawlessly pale. For that healthy glow, you add rouge made from crushed cochineal beetles mixed with mercury. This bright red paste is applied to your cheeks and lips, giving you a vibrant flush that screams health and vitality. Even though the mercury is slowly destroying your nervous system, and the beetle dye causes allergic reactions that leave your face swollen and blistered. Your eyes need drama, so you reach for kohl made from ground antimony mixed with lead and soot. This black paste is smeared around your eyes with bronze applicators, creating that sultry, smoky look that drives men wild. The antimony slowly blinds you while the lead poisons your bloodstream, but beauty requires sacrifice. For eyeshadow, you use ground malachite mixed with animal fat. This green copper ore creates beautiful emerald shades, but the copper slowly turns your skin green and causes painful rashes. The fat goes rancid in the heat, making your eyelids smell like rotting meat, but the colour is absolutely stunning. Your eyebrows need to be perfect, so you use a mixture of charcoal mixed with mouse fat. This black paste is carefully applied to create the perfect unibrow that Roman men find irresistible. The charcoal stains your skin permanently, while the mouse fat attracts insects. But fashion demands these sacrifices. For special occasions, you might use gold leaf applied directly to your skin with tree sap. This expensive treatment makes you literally shine like a goddess, but the sap causes severe allergic reactions and the gold flakes often embed in your skin permanently, creating painful, infected bumps. Lip colour requires crushed snails mixed with lead oxide. This purple paste stains your lips a beautiful wine colour, but the lead slowly poisons you every time you eat, drink or kiss someone. The snail slime makes your lips constantly wet and attracts flies, but the colour is worth the inconvenience. For the ultimate in luxury, some Roman women use makeup made from powdered pearls mixed with crushed diamonds. This expensive cosmetic supposedly makes your skin luminous and youthful, but mostly it just cuts your face with microscopic sharp edges, leaving you covered in tiny bleeding wounds. Perfume is applied liberally to mask the smell of rotting animal fat and chemical burns. Roman perfumes are made from ambergris, whale vomit, mixed with exotic spices and flowers. The whale vomit provides a musky base note while the spices create complex fragrant layers, but the overall effect is nauseating, especially when mixed with the smell of decomposing makeup ingredients. And for that final touch of glamour, you dust yourself with powder made from ground bones mixed with rice flour. This white powder supposedly sets your makeup and creates a flawless finish, but mostly it just makes you look like you've been dipped in flour and grave dirt. Welcome to Roman makeup, where beautiful meant toxic and glamorous meant potentially lethal. Now that you're fully poisoned and mutilated, let's explore what medieval European women did for beauty. Because apparently the Romans weren't creative enough. Medieval beauty standards required pale skin to show you didn't work in the fields, so wealthy women began bloodletting as a beauty treatment. Yes, draining blood to look fashionably anemic. Barber surgeons would make small cuts in your arms, or apply leeches to drain away the blood that gave you that healthy peasant glow. The process began at dawn, with specially trained bloodletters arriving at your manor, with their leather pouches full of hungry leeches and their collection of rusted blades. You would lie on a wooden table, while the barber surgeon selected the fattest, most aggressive leeches from his collection. These slimy creatures were placed strategically on your arms, neck and temples, where they would attach their circular mouths and begin feeding. The sensation was nauseating. Dozens of wet, writhing bodies sucking your life force while you lay perfectly still, determined to achieve that coveted deathly pallor. The leeches would gorge themselves until they swelled to 3 times their normal size, their translucent bodies turning dark red with your blood. When they finally detached, bloated and satisfied, they left behind perfectly round wounds that continued bleeding for hours. The bloodletter would collect your drained blood in pewter bowls, sometimes saving it for other beauty treatments or selling it to peasants who believed noble blood had magical properties. But simple bloodletting wasn't extreme enough for the truly fashionable. Some medieval women practiced controlled poisoning, taking small doses of arsenic or mercury daily to achieve that ethereal, deathly pale complexion. The slow poisoning made them thin, frail, and translucent, exactly the look that screamed aristocracy. They would measure out tiny amounts of white arsenic powder, mixing it with wine or honey to mask the metallic taste. The poisoning process was gradual and methodical. Too much would kill you outright. Too little wouldn't achieve the desired effect. The arsenic slowly accumulated in their systems, causing their hair to fall out in patches, their fingernails to develop white lines, and their skin to take on an almost translucent quality. They would shake uncontrollably, vomit regularly, and suffer from constant diarrhea. But these symptoms were considered signs that the treatment was working. The most dedicated poisoners would continue this regimen for years, gradually destroying their nervous systems while achieving that perfect corpse-like appearance that medieval men found irresistible. For facial treatments, medieval women used fresh urine mixed with ground pearls. This expensive paste was applied as a face mask and left to dry for hours. The ammonia burned their skin while the pearl dust created tiny cuts, but the results were supposedly luminous. The urine had to be collected fresh each morning, preferably from young virgins or pregnant women, as their waste was considered more potent. The pearls were ground with mortar and pestle until they became a fine, sharp powder that felt like sand against the skin. The mixture was applied thick across the face and neck, then left to dry while the woman sat motionless for hours. The ammonia would burn through the upper layers of skin, creating a chemical peel effect that left the face raw and bleeding. The pearl dust would embed in the open wounds, creating tiny white specks that supposedly gave the skin an otherworldly glow. Many women developed permanent scarring from this treatment, but the scars were considered fashionable proof of their dedication to beauty. Medieval teeth whitening involved rubbing teeth with honey mixed with ground pumice stone. This abrasive paste wore away tooth enamel but also removed stains, leaving teeth whiter but permanently damaged. The pumice stone was collected from volcanic regions and ground so fine it felt like flour. But it was actually composed of microscopic glass shards that slowly soared through tooth enamel with each application. The honey was added to make the mixture palatable, but it also fed the bacteria in the mouth, causing massive tooth decay. Women would rub this paste into their teeth with rough cloth for hours, ignoring the pain as their enamel was literally ground away. Many women's teeth became so soft they could be dented with a fingernail, and eating anything harder than porridge became impossible. But white teeth were a sign of purity and wealth, so the sacrifice was considered worthwhile. Hair removal reached new heights of creativity in medieval times. Medieval women used hot wax mixed with crushed glass. This glittering paste was applied to unwanted hair, then ripped off, taking hair, skin, and leaving behind sparkling wounds that often became infected. The glass was obtained by crushing wine bottles and goblets into fine powder, creating a substance that looked beautiful but was incredibly dangerous. The wax was heated until it was molten. Then the glass powder was stirred in, creating a glittering, deadly mixture. This paste was slathered onto legs, arms, and faces while still burning hot, causing immediate burns and blisters. When the wax cooled and hardened, it was ripped off in strips, taking not just hair but entire layers of skin embedded with glass fragments. The wounds would sparkle and glitter as they bled, creating an effect that was considered magically beautiful. For hair bleaching, they preferred a mixture of sulphur and quicklime heated over an open flame. This chemical reaction created toxic fumes that burned the lungs and often caught fire. But surviving hair was perfectly blonde, if there was any left. The sulphur and lime were mixed in metal bowls over roaring fires, creating a paste that literally steamed with poisonous vapours. The smell was overwhelming, like rotten eggs mixed with burning flesh. This caustic mixture was applied to the hair while still smoking hot, often catching fire and burning off entire sections of hair and scalp. The toxic fumes caused women to faint, vomit, and sometimes die from lung damage. Those who survived the process often found their hair had been burned away completely, leaving behind a scarred, bald scalp. But the few strands that survived were perfectly platinum blonde, making the risk seem worthwhile to medieval fashionistas. Medieval lip plumping involved stinging the lips with nettles or rubbing them with ground chili peppers. The swelling and pain were considered worth it for that bee-stung pout that men apparently found irresistible. The nettles were gathered fresh from the forest, their leaves covered with tiny poisonous hairs that injected venom into the skin. Women would rub these plants directly across their lips, causing immediate swelling, burning, and blistering. The chili peppers were ground into fine powder and mixed with animal fat to create a burning paste that was rubbed into the lips until they swelled like balloons. The pain was excruciating, and many women couldn't eat or drink for days afterward, but the resulting puffiness was considered the height of sensuality. Some women became addicted to the sensation, rubbing their lips with nettles daily until they were permanently scarred and disfigured. Eye brightening required drops made from belladonna extract, which literally means beautiful woman. This deadly nightshade dilated pupils, creating that wide-eyed innocent look, but also caused blindness, hallucinations, and death with repeated use. The belladonna was carefully cultivated in monastery gardens, where monks would extract the poisonous alkaloids from the berries and leaves. The extract was applied directly to the eyes with small glass droppers, causing immediate burning and temporary blindness. The pupils would dilate to enormous size, creating an otherworldly, doll-like appearance that was considered irresistibly attractive. But the poison would slowly accumulate in the system, causing hallucinations, seizures, and eventual blindness. Many medieval women went completely blind from this practice, but they continued using the drops because blind women were considered mystical and prophetic. For smooth skin, medieval women bathed in milk mixed with ground snail shells. The calcium supposedly strengthened skin while the snail slime provided moisture. But mostly it just made them smell like a dairy farm and left their skin covered in tiny shell cuts. The milk had to be fresh from the cow, still warm and foaming, and it was mixed with shells that had been ground to sharp powder. Women would soak in these baths for hours, allowing the acidic milk to burn their skin while the shell fragments created thousands of microscopic cuts. The snail slime was added for its supposed anti-aging properties, but it mostly just made the bath slippery and disgusting. Many women developed severe skin infections from these baths, but the few who survived claimed their skin felt softer and looked younger. The most extreme medieval beauty treatment involved sleeping with thin slices of raw meat, on your face overnight. The theory was that the meat would draw out impurities and nourish your skin, but mostly it just attracted rats and flies while leaving you smelling like a butcher shop. The meat had to be fresh, preferably from young animals, and it was sliced paper thin and arranged across the face like a grotesque mask. Women would lie perfectly still all night with rotting flesh covering their faces, breathing through small gaps left for their nostrils. The meat would spoil in the heat, creating a putrid soup that bred maggots and attracted every scavenger in the area. Rats would climb onto the bed to feast on the decaying meat, often biting the women's faces in the process. But those who survived claimed their skin looked plumper and more youthful in the morning. Medieval women also pioneered the art of controlled starvation, eating only small amounts of bread and water to maintain that fashionably frail appearance. The constant hunger and malnutrition gave them the pale, hollow-cheeked look that medieval men found attractive. They would fast for days at a time, consuming only communion wafers and holy water, believing that spiritual purity would enhance their physical beauty. The starvation was taken to extreme lengths, with some women eating nothing but air for weeks at a time. They would waste away to skeletal proportions, their ribs showing through their skin and their eyes sinking deep into their skulls. Many died from malnutrition, but those who survived were revered as living saints, their emaciated bodies considered the ultimate in spiritual and physical perfection. For that perfect medieval complexion, they would apply face masks made from ground earthworms mixed with honey. The worms supposedly contained youth-preserving properties while the honey fought infection. Instead, it usually caused horrible allergic reactions and made their faces swell like balloons. The earthworms were collected after rainstorms, when they emerged from the soil in writhing masses. They were ground alive in mortar and pestle, their guts and slime mixed with honey to create a grey, squirming paste that was applied to the face while still moving. The worms' digestive enzymes would eat away at the skin, while their parasites and bacteria caused massive infections. Women's faces would swell beyond recognition, covered in oozing sores and crawling with maggots, but they believed this was a sign that the treatment was working. Medieval women also practiced controlled disease exposure, deliberately infecting themselves with mild cases of plague, typhus, or leprosy to achieve that coveted deathly pallor. They would visit plague houses and leper colonies, exposing themselves to diseased air and contaminated water, in hopes of contracting a mild case that would leave them pale and interesting without actually killing them. Many would rub infected pus from plague victims into their own wounds, or drink water contaminated with typhus. The few who survived these infections often carried the diseases for life, slowly wasting away while maintaining that perfect corpse-like complexion that was so fashionable. They became walking plague carriers, spreading disease wherever they went, but their ghostly appearance was considered the ultimate in medieval beauty. And if all else failed, medieval women could always resort to the ultimate beauty treatment: ritual self-flagellation. They would whip themselves with thorn branches or metal chains, believing that physical suffering would purify their souls and enhance their beauty. The scars and wounds from these beatings were considered marks of spiritual devotion and physical perfection. Welcome to medieval beauty, where suffering was fashionable, nearly dying was the ultimate cosmetic treatment, and the line between beauty, ritual, and torture was non-existent. In an age where life was short and brutal, women found ways to make their beauty routines even more dangerous than daily existence. Let's journey further back to ancient Egypt, where Cleopatra herself pioneered beauty treatments that make medieval torture look like a spa day. Egyptian women began their beauty routines with exfoliation, using salt mixed with crocodile dung. This abrasive paste was scrubbed into their skin with rough stones, removing dead skin cells along with several layers of living tissue. The salt burned open wounds, while the crocodile dung added exotic bacteria to the mix. The crocodile excrement was collected fresh from the sacred pools of the Nile, where these massive reptiles basked in the sun, and left behind steaming piles of waste that was considered liquid gold by Egyptian beauticians. The dung was still warm when harvested, crawling with parasites and bacteria that had festered in the crocodile's digestive system. Egyptian women believed that crocodiles were sacred animals, blessed by the god Sobek. and that their waste contained divine properties that would transfer to human skin. The excrement was mixed with coarse Nile salt until it formed a gritty, putrid paste that smelled like rotting fish and decaying vegetation. This revolting mixture was then scrubbed into the skin with pumice stones and rough pottery shards, creating thousands of microscopic cuts that allowed the crocodile bacteria to penetrate deep into the flesh. The scrubbing process was so violent that it often removed entire layers of skin, leaving behind raw, bleeding wounds that oozed pus and attracted clouds of flies. But Egyptian women endured this agony because smooth, parasite-infected skin was considered the height of beauty and spiritual purity. For eye makeup, Egyptians used coal made from ground galena, a lead ore mixed with soot. This beautiful black powder created dramatic eye looks, but slowly poisoned everyone who used it. The lead accumulated in their systems, causing brain damage and death, but their eyes looked absolutely stunning. The galena was mined from deep underground caverns, where slaves worked in darkness, slowly dying from lead poisoning as they extracted the precious ore. The lead ore was ground to the finest powder using granite mortars, creating a substance so fine it felt like silk between the fingers. But each particle was a tiny poison dart, slowly penetrating the delicate skin around the eyes and entering the bloodstream. The soot was added from sacred temple fires, where offerings of frankincense and myrrh had been burned, supposedly giving the coal mystical properties. Egyptian women would apply this toxic mixture multiple times daily, using ivory applicators to paint elaborate designs around their eyes. The lead would slowly accumulate in their brains, causing tremors, memory loss, and violent mood swings. Their teeth would fall out, their hair would turn grey, and their hands would shake uncontrollably. But their eyes remained dramatically beautiful until the day they died from lead poisoning. Egyptian hair care involved washing hair with a mixture of animal fat and ash. This soap stripped away natural oils along with hair colour and sometimes hair itself. Many Egyptian women went bald from these treatments, but those who survived had perfectly clean, if damaged, locks. The animal fat was rendered from sacred bulls and hippos, animals that were sacrificed in elaborate temple ceremonies where their fat was collected while still warm from their bodies. The ash was created by burning specific woods and plants that were believed to have purifying properties. Lotus stems, papyrus reeds, and sacred sycamore bark were burned in temple fires until they became a caustic powder that could strip paint from walls. This ash was so alkaline it could burn through human skin in minutes. But Egyptian women believed it would cleanse their souls along with their hair. The fat and ash were mixed into a grey, lumpy soap that smelled like rotting meat and burning wood. When applied to hair, it would bubble and foam, literally cooking the hair follicles and often causing the hair to fall out in clumps. The few strands that survived would be bleached white and brittle as straw, but they were considered purified and blessed by the gods. For skin whitening, Egyptian women applied masks made from crocodile blood mixed with hippo fat. This red paste supposedly lightened skin tone while providing anti-aging benefits. But mostly it just made them smell like a zoo and attracted every fly in ancient Egypt. The crocodile blood was collected during ritual sacrifices where these massive reptiles were killed in honour of Sobek, their blood drained while their hearts still beat. The hippo fat was harvested from the sacred pools where these enormous animals wallowed in mud and filth. Hippos were considered magical creatures, their fat believed to contain the essence of the Nile itself. The fat was thick and rancid, crawling with parasites and bacteria that had festered in the hippo's flesh for years. When mixed together, the crocodile blood and hippo fat created a red, chunky paste that looked like raw meat and smelled like a slaughterhouse. This revolting mixture was smeared across the face and left to dry for hours, during which time it would attract every scavenger in the area. Women would sit motionless with their faces covered in rotting animal products, breathing through their mouths while flies laid eggs in the putrid mask. Egyptian dental care required chewing on twigs mixed with ground bones and sand. This abrasive mixture wore away tooth enamel, but also supposedly cleaned teeth and freshened breath. Most Egyptians had severely damaged teeth from this practice, but at least they were clean. The twigs were cut from sacred trees that grew along the Nile, trees that were often diseased and infested with insects. The bones were ground from sacrificial animals, usually cattle or goats that had been offered to the gods. These bones were often infected with diseases, and grinding them released bacteria and parasites into the powder. The sand was collected from the desert, where it had been bleached by the sun and contaminated with the waste of countless desert creatures. This mixture was chewed for hours each day, gradually wearing away tooth enamel until the teeth became soft and porous. The sand would embed in the tooth surfaces, creating rough patches that trapped food and bacteria. Many Egyptians lost all their teeth by age 30, but those who survived had perfectly clean, if completely destroyed, dental remains. Cleopatra herself was famous for bathing in donkey milk mixed with honey and crushed almonds. This luxurious treatment supposedly kept her skin soft and youthful, but the milk often spoiled during long baths, creating a putrid soup that made her smell like rotten dairy. The donkey milk had to be fresh, collected from animals that were specially fed on lotus flowers and sacred grains to enhance their milk's beauty properties. The honey was harvested from temple beehives, where the bees fed on offerings of flowers and fruits left by worshippers. The almonds were crushed by hand until they formed a gritty paste that was supposed to exfoliate the skin, but the mixture often spoiled in Egypt's heat, creating a fermented soup that bred bacteria and attracted insects. Cleopatra would soak in these baths for hours, allowing the spoiled milk to coat her skin while the crushed almonds abraded her flesh. The honey would ferment, creating alcohol that burned any cuts or scratches, while the rotten milk curdled around her body like chunky soup. She emerged from these baths smelling like a barnyard, but Egyptian physicians claimed her skin looked years younger. For hair removal, Egyptians used hot sugar wax mixed with crushed shells. This painful procedure removed hair along with significant amounts of skin. The sugar attracted insects while the shells created infected wounds. But smooth skin was worth any price. The sugar was boiled until it became a molten syrup that could burn through flesh in seconds. The shells were crushed oyster and mussel shells, creating sharp fragments that embedded in the wax like tiny knives. This burning mixture was applied to unwanted hair while still molten, instantly burning the skin and often causing permanent scarring. When the wax cooled, it was ripped off with such force that it often took chunks of flesh with it. The crushed shells would remain embedded in the wounds, causing infections that could take months to heal. But smooth, scarred skin was considered more beautiful than natural hair. Egyptian perfumes were made from animal musk mixed with rotting flowers and tree resins. These expensive fragrances were applied liberally to mask the smell of infected wounds and rotting beauty treatments. The result was a nauseating mixture of death and flowers. The animal musk was collected from the scent glands of civets, foxes, and wild cats, animals that were trapped and tortured until their fear and pain enhanced the potency of their musk. The flowers were deliberately allowed to rot in the sun until they became a putrid mass of fermenting petals crawling with maggots. The tree resins were collected from diseased trees, where infections had caused the bark to weep poisonous sap. All these ingredients were mixed together and left to ferment for months in sealed jars buried underground. The resulting perfume was so potent it could be smelled from miles away. When applied to the skin, it would burn like acid and often cause allergic reactions that left the wearer covered in angry red welts. But the overwhelming smell was supposed to mask the odour of rotting beauty treatments and infected wounds, making the wearer irresistibly exotic. For nail care, Egyptian women used henna mixed with ground beetle shells. This beautiful red dye stained nails permanently, but also caused painful allergic reactions that made fingers swell like sausages. The henna was mixed with the crushed shells of scarab beetles, insects that were considered sacred but whose shells contained toxins that caused severe burns. The mixture was painted onto fingernails and left to dry for days, during which time the toxins would seep through the nail beds and into the bloodstream. The resulting stains were beautiful and permanent, but many women lost their fingernails entirely as the flesh underneath rotted away. Those who kept their nails found them permanently discoloured and brittle, but the red stains were considered a mark of divine favour. The most extreme Egyptian beauty treatment involved mummification while still alive. Wealthy women would undergo partial mummification procedures, having their skin treated with natron salt and wrapped in linen bandages. This supposedly preserved their beauty for eternity, but usually just killed them slowly. The natron salt was so caustic it could dissolve flesh in hours, but Egyptian women believed it would preserve their beauty forever. The process began with the removal of internal organs while the woman was still alive, conscious, and watching. The organs were replaced with sacred resins and perfumes that burned like fire inside the body cavities. The skin was then treated with natron salt, which immediately began eating away at the flesh, causing excruciating pain as the salt crystals dissolved the tissue. The woman would be wrapped in linen bandages soaked in more caustic chemicals, then sealed in a sarcophagus to slowly die over the course of the weeks or months. Most women died screaming in agony, but those few who survived emerged from their tombs with perfectly preserved, if horrifically scarred skin that was supposed to last for eternity. Egyptian women also practiced controlled sun exposure, lying naked in the desert heat while covered in oil and ground minerals. This early tanning method often resulted in severe burns and heat stroke, but survivors had that coveted golden glow. The oils were mixed with ground malachite and gold dust, creating a paste that was supposed to enhance the sun's power while protecting the skin. Instead, the metal particles acted like tiny magnifying glasses, concentrating the sun's rays and literally cooking the flesh. Women would lie motionless in the blazing desert sun for hours, their skin blistering and peeling while they slowly dehydrated. Many died from heat stroke, but those who survived had a golden metallic sheen to their skin that was considered divinely beautiful. For lip enhancement, they used ground scarab beetles mixed with beeswax. This black paste plumped lips while turning them an attractive shade of beetle green. The wax melted in the heat, making lips constantly sticky and attracting flies. The scarab beetles were ground alive, their body fluids mixed with the wax to create a paste that was applied thick to the lips. The beetle toxins would cause the lips to swell and blister, turning them an unnatural green colour that was supposed to be exotic and attractive. The wax would melt and drip constantly in Egypt's heat, attracting swarms of flies and other insects that would feast on the rotting beetle paste. But Egyptian women endured this discomfort because beetle green lips were considered a sign of divine favour and irresistible beauty, and for the ultimate in Egyptian luxury, some women had gold thread sewn directly into their skin, creating permanent golden tattoos. This painful procedure often led to infection and death, but the survivors literally glowed like goddesses. The gold thread was heated until it was red hot, then sewn through the skin while still burning, creating permanent golden patterns that supposedly connected the wearer to the sun god Ra. The process was excruciating, with women often fainting from pain as the molten gold burned through their flesh. Many died from infections as their bodies rejected the foreign metal, but those who survived had permanent golden tattoos that gleamed in the sunlight and were considered the ultimate mark of divine beauty. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where beauty meant surviving chemical burns, where divine skin came from rotting animal waste, and where golden skin was worth dying for. In the land of the pharaohs, every beauty treatment was a test of devotion to the gods, and failure meant not just ugliness but death itself. But let's not forget about ancient Greek beauty standards, where philosophy met torture in the pursuit of physical perfection. Greek women believed beauty came from balance and proportion, so they measured their faces with mathematical precision and surgically altered any features that didn't meet golden ratio standards. This primitive plastic surgery involved cutting, reshaping, and repositioning facial features with bronze knives and no anesthesia. Greek philosophers had calculated the exact measurements for perfect beauty, creating detailed mathematical formulas that determined the ideal distance between eyes, the perfect angle of the nose, and the precise curve of the lips. These calculations were carved into marble tablets and kept in temple libraries, where wealthy women would consult them like sacred texts. If a woman's features didn't match the mathematical ideal, she was considered fundamentally flawed and in need of correction. The surgical procedures were performed by temple priests who doubled as physicians, using crude bronze instruments that were heated over sacred flames to supposedly purify them. The operations were conducted in temple courtyards, where the screams of the patients were considered offerings to the gods of beauty. Women would be strapped to marble altars while conscious, their faces carved and reshaped according to the mathematical formulas. The bronze knives would slice through flesh and cartilage while the woman remained awake, watching her own blood pool on the sacred stones below. For the perfect Greek nose, they would break it with hammers, then reset it in the ideal proportions. This excruciating procedure was performed while fully conscious, and often resulted in permanent breathing problems or death from infection. The nose breaking was considered an art form, with skilled practitioners who could shatter the cartilage in precise patterns to achieve the mathematically perfect angle. The hammers used were made of sacred bronze, blessed by priests and inscribed with geometric formulas. The impact had to be calculated precisely. Too gentle, and the nose wouldn't break properly; too hard, and the skull would crack. Women would bite down on leather straps while their noses were systematically destroyed and rebuilt, the cartilage ground to powder and reformed using bronze splints and leather bindings. The reshaping process took weeks, during which the woman's face would swell beyond recognition. Many died from brain damage caused by the impact, while others suffocated when their nasal passages became completely blocked by swelling and blood clots. But those who survived emerged with perfectly proportioned noses that matched the golden ratio exactly, even if they could no longer breathe properly. Greek hair care required washing with lye soap made from human ashes and animal fat. This caustic mixture burned scalps and often caused permanent hair loss, but clean hair was considered essential for beauty. The human ashes were collected from funeral pyres, where the bodies of slaves and criminals were burned in massive bonfires that could be seen for miles. The ash was considered spiritually purifying, containing the essence of human suffering that would supposedly cleanse the soul, along with the hair. The animal fat was rendered from sacrificial oxen, goats and pigs that were slaughtered in elaborate temple ceremonies. The fat was boiled until it became a thick, rancid oil that smelled like rotting meat and attracted clouds of flies. When mixed with the human ash, it created a grey, chunky soap that burned like acid when applied to the scalp. Greek women would lather this caustic mixture into their hair, ignoring the immediate burning sensation as their scalps began to blister and peel. The lye was so strong it would dissolve hair follicles on contact, often leaving women completely bald after just a few applications. Those who retained any hair found it bleached white and brittle as straw, but they considered this a sign of spiritual purification. For smooth skin, Greek women used pumice stones to literally sand away unwanted hair and rough patches. This abrasive treatment removed skin along with hair, leaving behind raw bleeding wounds that often became infected. The pumice stones were carved into specific shapes according to mathematical principles, with calculated angles and surfaces designed to remove maximum flesh with each stroke. The sanding process was performed in geometric patterns across the body, following diagrams that had been developed by Greek mathematicians. Women would lie on marble tables while attendants scraped away layers of skin with the volcanic glass, creating perfectly smooth surfaces that bled continuously. The goal was to achieve skin so smooth it reflected light like polished marble, regardless of how much flesh had to be removed in the process. Many women died from infections as bacteria entered their raw, exposed tissues. Others became permanently scarred as their skin tried to heal from the constant abrasion. But those who survived had skin that was considered mathematically perfect, smooth as marble, and just as lifeless. Greek makeup was made from white lead mixed with crushed pearls and powdered marble. This expensive foundation created the perfect pale complexion, while slowly poisoning the wearer with heavy metals. The white lead was ground so fine it felt like silk, but each particle was a tiny poison that would accumulate in the brain over time. The crushed pearls added luminosity, while the powdered marble gave the skin a stone-like texture that was considered ideal. The mixture was applied in calculated layers, with specific thicknesses determined by mathematical formulas. Too little makeup and the natural skin would show through, ruining the marble effect. Too much, and the face would look artificial rather than divinely perfect. The application process took hours, with skilled servants using measuring tools to ensure each layer was exactly the right thickness. The lead would slowly seep through the skin into the bloodstream, causing tremors, memory loss, and eventual madness. But Greek women continued applying the poison daily because a pale, marble-like complexion was considered the ultimate in beauty and divine favour. For rosy cheeks, they used rouge made from crushed insects mixed with wine. This red paste stained skin permanently, but provided that healthy flush that Greek men found attractive. The insects were crushed alive to ensure their blood was fresh, creating a red paste that was applied to the cheeks in precise geometric patterns. The wine was added to help the colour penetrate deeper into the skin, but it also caused burning and irritation that left permanent scars. The application was done according to mathematical principles, with specific measurements for the size and placement of each blush mark. The goal was to create the illusion of perfect health, while actually poisoning the wearer with insect toxins and alcohol. Many women developed permanent red blotches on their faces, but these were considered marks of beauty rather than disfigurement. Greek dental care involved cleaning teeth with urine mixed with ground glass. This abrasive mixture removed stains but also destroyed tooth enamel, leaving teeth soft and vulnerable to decay. The urine was collected from temple prostitutes, whose waste was considered particularly potent due to their connection with Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. The glass was ground from sacred mirrors and wine cups, creating a powder so fine it felt like flour, but was actually composed of millions of sharp edges. When mixed with urine, it created a paste that could strip the enamel from teeth in minutes. Greek women would scrub their teeth with this mixture daily, ignoring the blood and pain as their tooth enamel was literally ground away. The goal was to achieve perfectly white teeth that matched the marble statues of the gods. Many women lost all their teeth within years of starting this practice, but those who survived had teeth so white they seemed to glow in the dark. The constant pain and difficulty eating were considered acceptable prices for divine beauty. For eye enhancement, Greek women used drops made from deadly nightshade to dilate their pupils. This created an attractive wide-eyed look, but also caused blindness and hallucinations with repeated use. The nightshade was cultivated in temple gardens, where it was tended by blind priestesses who had lost their sight from years of exposure to the plant's toxins. The extract was so potent that a single drop could cause temporary blindness, while repeated use would result in permanent damage to the optic nerves. Greek women would apply the drops multiple times daily, enduring the burning pain as their vision slowly deteriorated. The dilated pupils created an otherworldly appearance that was considered divinely beautiful, but the cost was eventual blindness. Many women who used nightshade regularly began experiencing vivid hallucinations, seeing visions of gods and monsters that they believed were divine communications. These hallucinations were considered a sign of spiritual enlightenment, even as the women slowly lost their grip on reality. Greek perfumes were made from rotting flowers mixed with animal blood and excrement. These complex fragrances supposedly attracted men, but mostly just attracted flies and made everyone nauseous. The flowers were allowed to decompose in sealed jars for months, creating a putrid soup crawling with maggots and bacteria. The animal blood was collected from sacrificial rituals, while the excrement came from sacred temple animals. The mixture was so foul that it could clear a room within minutes, but Greek women believed that the stronger the smell, the more attractive they would be to potential suitors. The perfumes were applied liberally to pulse points, where they would mix with sweat and create an even more nauseating odour that followed the wearer wherever they went. The most extreme Greek beauty treatment involved controlled burns using hot coals to create decorative scars on the face and body. These permanent marks supposedly enhanced natural beauty, but often led to severe infections and death. The scars were created in specific geometric patterns that had been calculated by Greek mathematicians to achieve perfect proportion and balance. The coals were heated until they glowed white-hot, then pressed against the skin for calculated periods of time to create scars of precise depth and width. The pain was so intense that many women fainted during the procedure, but they were revived and forced to continue until the pattern was complete. The resulting scars would take months to heal, often becoming infected and causing massive tissue damage. But those who survived emerged with permanent geometric patterns carved into their flesh, marking them as devotees of mathematical beauty. The scars would sometimes become keloid, creating raised ridges that were considered even more beautiful than the original burns. Greek women also practiced competitive fasting, seeing who could survive the longest without food. The winner achieved that coveted skeletal appearance that represented spiritual purity and physical discipline. The fasting contests were held in temple courtyards, where women would compete to see who could starve themselves closest to death without actually dying. The contest could last for weeks, with participants gradually wasting away as spectators placed bets on who would collapse first. The skeletal appearance was considered the ultimate in beauty, representing complete spiritual transcendence over earthly needs. Many women died during these contests, but those who survived were revered as living embodiments of mathematical perfection. For hair colouring, they used acids mixed with ground metals. This toxic mixture created beautiful colours, but also burned through hair follicles, causing permanent baldness. The acids were so strong they could dissolve bronze, but Greek women applied them directly to their scalps in pursuit of the perfect hair colour. The metals added shimmer and colour, but they also poisoned anyone who touched the treated hair. The application process was excruciating, with women's scalps literally smoking as the acid ate through their flesh. Most lost all their hair within days, but the few strands that survived were considered divinely beautiful, shimmering with metallic colours that seemed to glow with inner fire. And for the ultimate Greek beauty treatment, wealthy women would have themselves buried alive in mud mixed with ground gemstones. This supposedly preserved their skin while the pressure created perfect proportions. Usually it just suffocated them. The mud was collected from sacred springs and mixed with crushed diamonds, rubies and emeralds that were supposed to transfer their properties to human skin. Women would be buried up to their necks in this mixture, with only their heads exposed to breathe. The gemstone fragments would cut their skin while the pressure from the mud gradually compressed their bodies into mathematically perfect proportions. Most suffocated as the mud settled and compressed their chest cavities, but those who survived emerged with skin that supposedly glowed with the light of precious stones. Welcome to ancient Greece, where beauty was a mathematical equation solved through torture, where perfection required precision, and where the wrong calculation meant death. In the cradle of philosophy and logic, women learned that true beauty could only be achieved through the careful application of pain, poison, and mathematical principles that reduced human flesh to geometric formulas. Now let's explore ancient Chinese beauty rituals, where tiny feet and poisonous makeup created some of history's most disturbing beauty standards. Chinese foot binding began when girls were as young as 4 years old. Their feet were soaked in warm water, then the 4 smallest toes were broken and folded under the sole. The arch was then broken and the foot was bound tightly with cloth strips. This process was repeated for years, gradually crushing the bones into the ideal 3-inch lotus foot. The practice began with a ritual ceremony, where the mother would prepare special herbal baths to soften the child's bones, making them easier to break and reshape. The little girl would be seated on a low stool while her mother soaked her feet in scalding water, mixed with herbs and animal blood. The heat would soften the bones and flesh, making them pliable for the breaking process that followed. Once the feet were properly softened, the mother would take each tiny toe and snap it backward, breaking the delicate bones with audible cracks that echoed through the room. The child's screams were considered part of the ritual, a necessary sacrifice to achieve the perfect lotus feet that would make her irresistible to future husbands. After all the toes except the big toe were broken and folded under the sole, the mother would use her thumbs to press down on the arch, applying increasing pressure until the bones cracked and the foot bent in half. The pain was excruciating and never ended. Broken bones constantly ground against each other while tight bindings cut off circulation. Many girls died from infection or shock, but those who survived could barely walk and needed help with basic tasks. The binding cloths were wrapped so tightly that they cut off blood flow, causing the toes to rot and sometimes fall off entirely. The smell of decomposing flesh was masked with perfumes and powders, but the infection often spread throughout the foot and up the leg. Girls would spend months bedridden as their feet slowly healed into the desired shape, their bones fusing in unnatural positions that created the coveted 3-inch lotus foot. The pain was constant and unbearable, but any attempt to loosen the bindings would result in severe punishment. Many girls tried to unwrap their feet in secret, only to have them rebound even tighter as punishment. The process continued for years, with the bindings tightened regularly to prevent the bones from healing in their natural positions. By adolescence, the girls had feet so deformed they could only take tiny shuffling steps, swaying gracefully as they walked in a manner that Chinese men found irresistibly erotic. The suffering was considered essential to the beauty. The more pain a woman had endured, the more desirable her feet became. Chinese face painting required white lead powder mixed with mercury and arsenic. This deadly makeup created the perfect porcelain complexion, but slowly poisoned the wearer with every application. Many Chinese women suffered from lead poisoning, causing tremors, memory loss, and death. The white lead was ground so fine it felt like silk powder, but each particle was a tiny poison that would accumulate in the brain over years of daily application. The mercury was added to give the makeup a subtle shimmer, like moonlight on porcelain, while the arsenic created a luminous glow that was considered divinely beautiful. The mixture was applied in multiple layers each morning, building up a thick white mask that completely concealed the natural skin tone. The application process took hours, with servants using soft brushes made from infant hair to achieve the perfect porcelain finish. The makeup was so thick it would crack when the wearer smiled or spoke, requiring constant touch-ups throughout the day. The lead would slowly seep through the skin into the bloodstream, causing gradual neurological damage that began with trembling hands and progressed to memory loss, paralysis, and eventual death. But Chinese women continued applying the poison daily because a white porcelain complexion was considered the ultimate mark of beauty and refinement. The mercury would cause the hair and teeth to fall out, while the arsenic would slowly burn through the skin, creating open sores that were covered with even more makeup. Many women became completely bald and toothless by their 20s, but they continued painting their faces white until the day they died from heavy metal poisoning. For perfect eyebrows, Chinese women would pluck every hair, then redraw them with charcoal mixed with mouse blood. This created perfectly shaped brows, but the constant plucking and toxic makeup caused painful infections. The eyebrow plucking was done with heated bronze tweezers that would sear the hair follicles, preventing regrowth and creating permanent bald patches above the eyes. The mouse blood was collected fresh each morning from trapped rodents, mixed with charcoal ground from burned human bones to create a black paste that could be painted onto the skin. The mixture was applied in thin, precise lines according to the latest fashion trends, which changed frequently and required women to constantly repluck and redraw their eyebrows in new shapes and positions. The constant plucking caused massive infections as bacteria entered the damaged follicles, creating oozing sores that were hidden beneath layers of white makeup. Many women developed permanent scarring and keloid growths where their eyebrows used to be, but the artificial brows painted in mouse blood were considered more beautiful than natural hair. Chinese hair care involved washing hair with fermented rice water, mixed with ashes from burned bones. This treatment supposedly strengthened hair but mostly just made it smell like death and attracted insects. The rice water was left to ferment for weeks until it became a putrid alcoholic soup, crawling with maggots and bacteria. The bone ash was created by burning the remains of executed criminals, whose suffering was believed to add spiritual power to the mixture. The hair washing ritual took place monthly, with women soaking their long black hair in the fermented mixture for hours while enduring the nauseating smell and the feeling of insects crawling through their locks. The alcohol in the fermented rice would burn the scalp, while the bone ash created an alkaline solution that stripped away natural oils and often caused hair to fall out in clumps. The goal was to achieve hair so black it seemed to absorb light, like looking into an abyss. The few women whose hair survived the treatments had locks that were brittle and lifeless, but absolutely black, considered the ultimate in Chinese beauty. Many women went completely bald from the treatments, requiring them to wear elaborate wigs made from the hair of executed criminals. For smooth skin, they used jade rollers heated to burning temperatures and rolled across the face. These hot stones supposedly tightened skin, but actually burned through several layers, leaving permanent scars. The jade rollers were heated over sacred fires until they glowed with inner heat, then pressed against the face while still burning hot. The theory was that jade possessed magical properties that would transfer to human skin through direct contact. The rolling process was performed in specific patterns according to ancient Chinese beauty texts, with the burning jade pressed against pressure points and meridians throughout the face. The pain was excruciating as the heated stone literally cooked the flesh, leaving behind charred lines and patterns that were considered marks of spiritual beauty. Many women suffered permanent nerve damage from the heat, losing feeling in parts of their faces, while others developed infections as bacteria entered the burned tissues. But the jade scars were considered more beautiful than natural skin, marking the wearer as someone wealthy enough to afford such extreme treatments. Chinese dental care required blackening teeth with iron filings mixed with tea. This created the fashionable black smile that showed you were wealthy enough not to need functional teeth. The iron filings were so fine they cut the gums and tongue with every movement, causing constant bleeding that was mixed with the tea to create a black paste that stained teeth permanently. The blackening process took months of daily applications, gradually building up layers of iron and tea until the teeth were completely black. The iron would rust inside the mouth, creating a metallic taste that never went away, while the constant bleeding from cut gums would mix with the stain to create an even darker colour. Black teeth were considered a sign of ultimate refinement, showing that the woman was so wealthy she didn't need to eat coarse foods that would require strong white teeth. The practice often led to complete tooth loss as the iron filings wore away the enamel, but toothless black gums were considered even more beautiful than black teeth. For nail growth, Chinese women soaked their fingers in mixture of ground pearls and chicken blood. This supposedly strengthened nails while the blood provided nutrients. Usually it just caused severe infections. The pearls were ground so fine they became sharp powder that would cut the nail beds and cuticles, allowing the chicken blood to penetrate deep into the wounds. The soaking sessions lasted for hours, with women sitting motionless while their fingers marinated in the blood and pearl mixture. The goal was to achieve nails so long they could not perform any manual labour, proving the woman's status as someone too refined for work. The blood would often become infected with bacteria, causing the fingers to swell and suppurate, but long infected nails were considered more beautiful than healthy short ones. Chinese perfumes were made from crushed flowers mixed with animal musk and human hair. This complex fragrance was supposed to attract men, but mostly attracted flies and made everyone sick. The human hair was collected from executed criminals and plague victims, believed to contain the essence of human suffering that would make the perfume more potent. The animal musk came from the scent glands of civet cats that were tortured to enhance the strength of their secretions, while the flowers were allowed to rot until they became a putrid soup, crawling with insects. The combination created a smell so overwhelming it could be detected from miles away. But Chinese women believed that the stronger the odour, the more irresistible they would become. The most extreme Chinese beauty ritual involved neck stretching using heavy bronze rings. These metal coils gradually elongated the neck over years, creating the fashionable swan-like appearance. Many women suffocated when the rings slipped. The rings were added one at a time, starting in childhood with lightweight bronze coils that gradually compressed the shoulders and stretched the neck vertebrae. As the woman grew, heavier and heavier rings were added, sometimes weighing over 50 pounds and requiring the wearer to move very carefully to avoid crushing their own windpipe. The rings were permanently welded in place, making removal impossible without killing the wearer. The stretching process was irreversible. Once begun, it had to continue for life or the unsupported neck would snap under its own weight. Many women died when the rings shifted during sleep or sudden movement, crushing their throats or severing their spinal cords. But those who survived had necks so long they resembled swans, considered the ultimate in Chinese feminine beauty. The constant pressure from the rings often caused permanent nerve damage, leaving the women unable to feel or move their arms. But paralysed swan-like beauty was considered preferable to normal human proportions. Chinese women also practiced controlled poisoning, taking small doses of lead and mercury daily to maintain their pale complexion. This slow poisoning created the perfect deathly appearance, but usually led to actual death. The poisoning was carefully regulated. with women taking precisely measured doses that would gradually accumulate in their systems over years. The goal was to achieve a complexion so pale it seemed translucent, like looking through porcelain to see the blue veins beneath. The slow poisoning would cause the skin to become thin and papery, the hair to fall out, and the teeth to blacken and crumble, but these effects were considered signs of refined beauty rather than illness. For eye enhancement, they used ground jade mixed with snake venom to create colourful eyeshadow. This beautiful makeup slowly blinded the wearer, but the colours were absolutely stunning. The jade was ground so fine it became a powder that sparkled like crushed jewels, while the snake venom added a luminous quality that made the eyes seem to glow with inner fire. The venom would slowly damage the corneas with each application, causing gradual vision loss that was considered a fair trade for eyes that sparkled like precious stones. Many Chinese women went completely blind from this practice, but blind women with jewel-like eyes were considered more beautiful than sighted women with ordinary vision. And for the ultimate Chinese beauty treatment, wealthy women would have porcelain chips embedded directly into their skin. This created a permanent doll-like appearance, but the foreign objects often caused fatal infections. The porcelain chips were fired in kilns until they became harder than bone, then surgically implanted under the skin in intricate patterns that transformed the face into living artwork. The insertion process was performed without anesthesia, with sharp bronze needles used to push the porcelain fragments deep into the facial tissues. The goal was to create a face that looked like it had been carved from porcelain rather than born from flesh, with hard artificial contours that never aged or changed expression. The porcelain would often shift under the skin, cutting through blood vessels and nerves, while the body's immune system would attack the foreign objects, causing massive infections that could kill within days. But those who survived emerged with faces that looked like living dolls, their humanity sacrificed for the sake of achieving perfect artificial beauty. Welcome to ancient China, where beauty meant binding and breaking, where perfection came with paralysis, and where the ultimate goal was to transform living flesh into something as beautiful and lifeless as a porcelain doll. In the Middle Kingdom, women learned that true beauty required the complete sacrifice of comfort, health, and humanity in pursuit of an artificial ideal that was literally more precious than life itself. Let's travel to ancient India, where beauty rituals combined spirituality with some truly horrifying physical modifications. Indian beauty standards required elaborate scarification, creating permanent decorative scars across the face and body. Hot metal tools were used to burn intricate patterns into the skin while the person remained conscious and stoic. These scars were considered more beautiful than smooth skin. The process began in childhood, with heated bronze implements pressed into tender flesh to create geometric patterns that told stories of family lineage, spiritual devotion, and social status. The scarification ceremonies were elaborate religious rituals conducted in temple courtyards, where specially trained priests would heat sacred bronze tools in ceremonial fires, fed with sandalwood, frankincense, and human hair. The tools were carved with intricate patterns representing different gods and spiritual concepts, and when pressed into flesh, they would permanently brand these divine symbols onto the body. Young girls would be brought to the temples during festival seasons, their bodies prepared with ritual baths and sacred oils before the scarification began. The process could take days or even weeks, with different patterns added during multiple sessions to avoid killing the child from shock and blood loss. Each burn had to be perfectly placed according to ancient texts that specified the exact location and depth required for spiritual and aesthetic perfection. The hot metal would sear through skin and flesh, often reaching down to the bone, while the child was expected to remain perfectly still and silent. Any crying or movement was considered a sign of spiritual weakness, and would result in additional scarification as punishment. The smell of burning flesh mixed with incense would fill the temple courtyards as dozens of children underwent this ritual simultaneously. The healing process was deliberately prolonged and made more painful by rubbing salt, ash, and various irritants into the fresh wounds to ensure the scars would heal as raised, prominent ridges. The infections that resulted were considered sacred, a sign that the gods were inhabiting the wounds and blessing the child with divine beauty. For perfect teeth, Indian women would file them into sharp points using rough stones and metal files. This painful procedure was performed without anaesthesia and often led to severe infections, but pointed teeth were considered attractive and spiritual. The filing process took days, with each tooth carefully shaped to resemble animal fangs. Many women died from the resulting infections, but those who survived were considered blessed by the gods. The tooth filing was performed by temple dentists who specialised in creating different animal-inspired patterns. Tiger teeth were the most prized, requiring the front teeth to be filed into long, sharp fangs that could tear flesh. Cobra teeth involved filing all the teeth into needle-sharp points that could inject venom if the woman bit someone. The most extreme pattern was elephant teeth, where the front teeth were filed into flat, squared edges while the back teeth were completely removed. The filing was done with rough sandstone blocks and metal rasps that would slowly grind away tooth enamel and dentin over several sessions. The exposed nerves would cause excruciating pain that lasted for months, but the pain was considered part of the spiritual transformation. Many women lost their teeth entirely to infection, but toothless women were considered even more spiritually advanced, having transcended the need for earthly sustenance. Indian hair care involved washing with cow urine mixed with herbs and flowers. This holy mixture supposedly purified both body and soul, but mostly just made hair smell like a barn and attracted flies. The urine was collected fresh each morning from sacred temple cows, then mixed with jasmine petals, turmeric and ground neem leaves. Women would soak their hair in this mixture for hours, believing it would give them spiritual power and irresistible beauty. The cow urine washing ritual was performed publicly in temple courtyards, where women would kneel before sacred cows and collect the warm urine directly in bronze bowls as it flowed. The fresher the urine, the more potent its spiritual properties were believed to be. The mixture would be heated over sacred fires until it reached a scalding temperature that would burn the scalp and often cause permanent hair loss. The ritual required women to completely submerge their heads in the boiling urine mixture while chanting prayers and maintaining perfect stillness. The ammonia would burn their eyes and throat, while the heat would blister their scalps. But any signs of discomfort were considered spiritual weakness. The hair that survived these treatments would be permanently stained yellow and would smell so strongly of ammonia that it could be detected from great distances. For skin lightening, they used turmeric mixed with ground pearls and lead. This golden paste created beautiful colour, but the lead slowly poisoned the wearer while the turmeric stained everything yellow. The paste was applied daily, covering the entire body in a golden sheen that was supposed to make women glow like goddesses. The lead content was so high that many women suffered from severe neurological damage, losing their ability to speak or think clearly. The turmeric and lead paste was applied in elaborate patterns according to ancient texts that specified the exact designs needed to attract different gods and spiritual energies. The application process took hours each day, with servants using sacred brushes made from human hair to paint intricate geometric patterns across the woman's entire body. The lead would slowly accumulate in the brain and organs, causing tremors, paralysis, and eventual death. But golden skin was considered worth any sacrifice. The turmeric would permanently stain the skin bright yellow, marking the woman as someone dedicated to spiritual beauty. The staining was so intense that it would seep through clothing and bedding, turning everything the woman touched a bright golden colour. Many women became walking golden statues, their skin so saturated with turmeric that they appeared to be made of gold rather than flesh. Indian eye makeup was made from soot mixed with ground glass and animal fat. This created dramatic dark eyes, but the glass caused constant irritation and eventual blindness. The glass fragments were so fine they felt like powder, but they slowly scratched away at the cornea with every blink. Women accepted this gradual loss of vision as a spiritual sacrifice, believing that outer blindness would enhance their inner sight. The soot was collected from temple fires, where sacred texts and offerings had been burned, supposedly imbuing it with divine power. The animal fat came from sacrificial bulls and goats, their rendered fat mixed with the soot and glass to create a black paste that would permanently darken the area around the eyes. The application process required the paste to be rubbed directly into the eyeballs, causing immediate pain and damage to the delicate tissues. The glass fragments would embed in the corneas and eyelids, creating a sparkling effect that was considered divinely beautiful. Each blink would cause the glass to cut deeper into the eye tissues, gradually destroying vision while creating the illusion of eyes that sparkled like stars. Many women went completely blind within years of starting this practice, but blind women with sparkling eyes were considered more spiritually advanced than sighted women with ordinary vision. For lip colour, they used beetle juice mixed with ground insects. This red stain was permanent and supposedly had spiritual significance, but mostly just made lips constantly drip red saliva. The insects were crushed alive, their body fluids mixed with the bitter beetle nut juice to create a blood-red paste that stained lips permanently. The constant drooling was considered attractive, as it showed a woman was properly medicated with the sacred mixture. The betel and insect paste was so caustic, it would burn through lip tissue, often causing permanent damage to the mouth and throat. The insects used were specifically chosen for their toxicity, including poisonous beetles and spiders whose venom would cause the lips to swell and discolour. The mixture had to be reapplied constantly as the saliva would wash it away, but each application would burn deeper into the tissues. The red drool that resulted from this practice was considered so beautiful that women would collect it in small vials and use it as additional makeup for their cheeks and forehead. The constant poisoning from the insect toxins would often cause systemic effects, including hallucinations, paralysis, and death. But red lips that dripped constantly were considered the ultimate mark of spiritual devotion. Indian perfumes were made from sandalwood, mixed with rotting meat and excrement. These complex fragrances were believed to please the gods, but usually just pleased the flies. The rotting meat was usually from sacred animals, allowed to decompose for weeks before being ground into paste. The resulting smell was nauseating to human noses, but supposedly attractive to divine beings. The perfume creation process was an elaborate ritual, conducted in temple complexes where the rotting meat, fresh excrement from sacred animals, and ground sandalwood were mixed in specific proportions according to ancient formulas. The mixture would ferment for months in sealed clay pots buried underground, developing an odour so intense it could cause immediate vomiting in anyone who smelled it. The fermented perfume was applied liberally to the entire body, soaking into clothing and hair until the wearer became a walking source of overwhelming stench. The theory was that the more nauseating the smell to humans, the more attractive it would be to gods and spirits. Women who wore these perfumes were often forced to live in isolation, because their odour was so offensive. But spiritual isolation was considered a mark of divine favour. The most extreme Indian beauty ritual involved piercing the tongue with hot needles, then threading gold wire through the holes. This created permanent golden tongue jewellery but often led to infection and death. The needles were heated until they glowed red hot, then pushed through the tongue while the woman chanted prayers. The gold wire was threaded through while the flesh was still burning, creating a permanent golden web across the tongue that made speaking difficult but was considered supremely beautiful. The tongue-piercing ceremony was performed by specialised priests who would heat dozens of needles simultaneously in sacred fires. The woman's tongue would be held extended while multiple needles were pushed through it in complex patterns, creating a mesh of holes through which gold wire could be woven. The pain was so intense that many women would faint repeatedly during the procedure, but they would be revived and forced to continue until the pattern was complete. The gold wire would often cut through the tongue tissue as it healed, requiring constant replacement and adjustment. Many women lost portions of their tongues to infection or metal poisoning, but the ability to speak was considered less important than the beauty of a golden tongue that caught the light when the mouth was opened. Indian women also practiced controlled dehydration, drinking only small amounts of water to maintain their ethereal appearance. The constant thirst and kidney damage were considered worth it for spiritual beauty. They believed that excessive water consumption made the body too earthly, too connected to base physical needs. By maintaining constant thirst, they achieved a translucent, otherworldly appearance that was highly prized. The dehydration was taken to such extremes that many women would go days without any water at all, surviving only on small amounts of cow urine or fermented fruit juice. Their skin would become paper-thin and translucent, their eyes would sink deep into their skulls, and their bodies would waste away to skeletal proportions. The kidney damage from chronic dehydration would often prove fatal, but the ghostly appearance was considered the ultimate in spiritual beauty. For nail decoration, they would drive bamboo splinters under their fingernails, then paint them with coloured lace. This created permanent coloured nails, but the splinters often caused fatal infections. The bamboo was sharpened to needle points, then hammered under each nail bed. The lac resin was then painted over the protruding splinters, creating beautiful coloured spikes that extended from each finger. The constant pain was considered a form of spiritual discipline. The bamboo splinters would often become infected, causing the fingers to swell and suppurate. Many women lost their fingernails entirely as the flesh underneath rotted away, but the coloured bamboo spikes were considered more beautiful than natural nails. The infection would often spread up the arms and throughout the body, causing death from sepsis, but nail decoration was considered so important that the risk was acceptable. Indian dental care required chewing on neem twigs mixed with ground bones and cow dung. This supposedly cleaned teeth and provided spiritual benefits, but mostly just damaged enamel and caused disease. The bones were usually from sacred animals, ground so fine they felt like sand between the teeth. The cow dung was dried and powdered, then mixed with the bone dust and neem bark to create an abrasive paste that wore away tooth enamel, but supposedly connected the chewer to divine cattle spirits. The chewing process had to be performed for hours each day, gradually wearing away all tooth enamel until the teeth became soft and porous. The bone dust would embed in the tooth surfaces, while the cow dung introduced bacteria and parasites into the mouth. Many women lost all their teeth within years of starting this practice, but toothless women were considered more spiritually advanced than those who retained their earthly teeth. For body modification, some Indian women practiced ritual amputation, removing finger joints or entire fingers as offerings to the gods. These missing digits were considered marks of extreme devotion and spiritual beauty. The amputations were performed with crude iron tools, often resulting in massive infections and death. The fingers would be cut off one joint at a time over several years, with each amputation marking another level of spiritual advancement. The severed fingers would be offered to temple gods in elaborate ceremonies, where they would be burned on sacred fires or fed to temple animals. The stumps would be cauterized with red-hot irons to prevent bleeding, but the risk of infection was enormous. Women who survived multiple amputations were considered living saints, their mutilated hands proof of their complete devotion to spiritual beauty over earthly concerns. The wealthy practiced extreme body stretching, using weights and pulleys to gradually elongate their necks, earlobes, and lips. These stretched features were considered divine, resembling the elongated forms of gods and goddesses depicted in temple art. The stretching process took years and often resulted in permanent disability, but the results were considered worth any sacrifice. The neck stretching involved hanging heavy weights from bronze collars that would gradually stretch the vertebrae over months or years. The earlobes were stretched using progressively larger bronze plugs until they could accommodate ornaments the size of dinner plates. The lips were stretched using wooden discs that would be replaced with larger ones as the tissue expanded, eventually creating lips that hung down to the chest. Many women died from these stretching procedures when the overstretched tissues would tear or when the weight would crush their spinal cords. But those who survived had bodies that no longer resembled normal human proportions, instead looking like the divine beings depicted in temple sculptures. And for the ultimate Indian beauty treatment, wealthy women would have sacred ash from cremated bodies rubbed into their skin. This supposedly provided spiritual protection while enhancing beauty. Usually it just caused horrible infections. The ash was collected from funeral pyres while still warm, then mixed with clarified butter and honey. This paste was rubbed into open wounds and cuts, supposedly transferring the spiritual power of the deceased into the living woman's body. The ash-rubbing ceremony was performed in cremation grounds where the recently dead were being burned on funeral pyres. Women would roll in the ashes while they were still hot, allowing the cremated remains of the dead to coat their entire bodies. The ash would be rubbed into any available cuts or wounds, or new cuts would be made specifically for this purpose. The infections that resulted from rubbing cremated remains into open wounds were often fatal, but the women believed they were literally incorporating the spiritual essence of the dead into their own bodies. Those who survived emerged with skin that was permanently grey from the embedded ash, marking them as having transcended the boundary between life and death. in pursuit of ultimate spiritual beauty. Welcome to ancient India, where beauty was sacred and suffering was spiritual, where every scar told a story of divine devotion, and every modification brought you closer to the realm of the gods. In the land of temples and scriptures, women learned that true beauty could only be achieved through the complete sacrifice of physical comfort, transforming their bodies into living shrines that honoured the divine through deliberate and exquisite suffering. But perhaps no ancient culture took beauty to more extreme lengths than the Mayans, where cranial modification and jade dental implants created some of history's most dramatic beauty standards. Mayan beauty began at birth when babies' heads were bound between wooden boards to create the elongated skull shape that was considered divine. This process took months, and many children died from the pressure, but survivors had the coveted cone-shaped heads. The wooden boards were strapped tightly to newborn skulls, while the bones were still soft, gradually moulding the growing brain into an unnatural elongated shape. Parents would adjust the pressure daily, listening for the subtle cracking sounds that indicated the skull was properly deforming. Many infants died from brain damage, but those who survived were marked as chosen by the gods. The skull binding ceremony was conducted within hours of birth, before the baby's bones had time to harden into their natural shape. Sacred wooden boards, carved with symbols of the maize god and blessed by priests in elaborate temple rituals, were positioned on either side of the infant's head. These boards were connected by leather straps and rope that could be gradually tightened over the coming months. The process had to begin immediately because the window for reshaping the skull was very brief. The wooden boards would press against the soft fontanelles and growing bone plates, slowly forcing the brain and skull to grow upward rather than outward. Parents would tighten the straps daily, monitoring the baby's breathing and consciousness to ensure they were applying maximum pressure without killing the child. The infants would scream constantly from the pressure and pain, but these cries were considered sacred offerings to the gods. Many babies would suffer seizures as their brains were compressed and reshaped, while others would simply stop breathing as the pressure became too great. The mortality rate was enormous, but families considered it an honour if their child was chosen by the gods to die during this transformation. Those who survived emerged after months of binding with skulls that rose to impossible heights, their brains compressed into elongated shapes that barely fit inside the distorted bone structure. These cone-headed individuals were considered divine, their artificially reshaped skulls marking them as living representations of the maize god, whose own head was depicted as an elongated ear of corn. For perfect teeth, Mayans would drill holes in healthy teeth, then embed jade stones directly into the enamel. These beautiful green gems supposedly connected the wearer to the gods, but often caused infections that killed through sepsis. The drilling was done with sharp obsidian blades and hollow reeds, creating perfectly round holes in living teeth. The jade stones were then hammered into the holes with bronze tools, often cracking the tooth completely. The resulting infections caused horrible abscesses that swelled the face beyond recognition. The dental drilling ceremony was performed by specialized priests who had trained for years to perfect the art of tooth modification. The jade stones were carefully selected and shaped to fit perfectly into the drilled holes, each one representing a different god or spiritual concept. The drilling process was performed without any form of anesthesia, with the patient held down by assistants while conscious and fully aware of every scrape and crack. The obsidian blades used for drilling were sharper than modern surgical steel, but they would shatter inside the tooth if too much pressure was applied. The drilling had to be done slowly and carefully, with the priest rotating the blade by hand while gradually deepening the hole. The sound of the drilling would echo through the temple courtyard, mixed with the screams of the patient and the chanting of assembled worshippers. Once the holes were complete, the jade stones would be hammered into place using small bronze chisels. The impact would often crack the tooth completely, splitting it down to the root and exposing the nerve. The jade stones had to fit so tightly that they could never fall out, which meant they were often driven too deep, penetrating into the tooth's pulp chamber. The infections that followed were catastrophic. The jade would prevent proper drainage, trapping bacteria inside the tooth, where it would multiply and spread. The patient's face would swell to grotesque proportions as abscesses formed, often spreading to the brain and causing death within days. but those who survived emerged with mouths full of gleaming green stones, their jade teeth marking them as chosen representatives of the jade-skinned maize god. Mayan scarification involved cutting intricate patterns into the skin with obsidian blades, then rubbing ash and charcoal into the wounds. This created permanent raised scars that told stories, but the process was excruciating and often fatal. The patterns were cut while the person was tied to wooden frames, unable to move as artists carved detailed scenes of gods, animals, and cosmic events into their living skin. The ash and charcoal were rubbed into the fresh wounds while they were still bleeding, ensuring the scars would heal in raised, blackened ridges. The scarification ceremonies were elaborate public rituals that could last for days or weeks, with master artists working on single individuals to create complex narrative scenes across their entire bodies. The obsidian blades used were so sharp they could slice through flesh like paper, but they had to be wielded with incredible precision to create the intricate patterns required by Mayan artistic traditions. The person being scarified would be positioned on a wooden rack in the centre of the temple courtyard, their limbs spread and bound to prevent any movement that might disrupt the artist's work. The cutting would begin with an outline of the entire design, traced across the body in shallow cuts that mark the boundaries of each figure and symbol. Once the outline was complete, the artist would begin the deep cutting that would create the actual scars. Each line had to be cut to a precise depth. Too shallow, and the scar wouldn't be raised enough to be visible. Too deep, and the person would bleed to death. The obsidian blades would slice through skin, fat, and sometimes muscle, creating channels that would be filled with ash and charcoal while still bleeding. The ash used was collected from sacrificial fires where human hearts had been burned, supposedly imbuing it with the spiritual power of the sacrificed victims. The charcoal came from trees that had been struck by lightning, considered sacred to the storm god Chak. This mixture would be rubbed deep into the wounds, causing excruciating pain as the caustic materials burned the exposed flesh. The healing process was deliberately prolonged by reopening the wounds periodically and adding more ash and charcoal to ensure the scars would heal as prominent raised ridges. Many people died from infection as bacteria entered the deep cuts, but those who survived emerged with their entire bodies covered in raised black scars that told elaborate stories of gods, creation myths, and cosmic battles. For eye enhancement, Mayans would hang small jade beads from their eyelashes. These beautiful ornaments caught the light dramatically, but also caused constant irritation and infections. The beads were attached by threading thin gold wires through the eyelash follicles, a process so painful that many people fainted. The constant weight of the jade eventually pulled out the eyelashes entirely, leaving behind infected, scarred eyelids. The jade bead attachment ceremony was performed by specialised artisans who would use hollow bone needles to thread gold wire through individual eyelash follicles. Each eyelash had to be pierced at its root, with the wire passed through the follicle and out through the skin. The jade beads would then be attached to the wire, hanging like tiny green teardrops from each lash. The weight of the jade would gradually pull on the eyelash follicles, causing constant pain and irritation. The gold wire would cut through the delicate skin around the eyes, creating infected wounds that would weep continuously. The beads would catch on clothing and bedding, yanking on the already damaged eyelashes and often tearing them out completely. As the eyelashes were gradually destroyed by the weight and movement of the jade beads, new holes would be drilled through the eyelids themselves to continue hanging ornaments around the eyes. Eventually, the entire eye area would become a mass of infected puncture wounds and torn tissue, but the sparkling jade beads were considered so beautiful that the destruction of the eyes was considered an acceptable sacrifice. Mayan lip modification involved piercing lips with sharp bones, then gradually stretching the holes to accommodate large jade plugs. These massive ornaments supposedly enhanced beauty, but made eating and speaking nearly impossible. The stretching process took years, with progressively larger plugs inserted every few months. The final jade ornaments were often so large they hung down to the chin, requiring the wearer to tilt their head back constantly to prevent drooling. The lip stretching began in childhood with small bone needles used to pierce the lower lip. The initial piercing was performed during religious ceremonies, with the child held down while a priest drove a sharpened bone through the lip. The bone would be left in place for weeks until the hole healed, then gradually replaced with larger and larger plugs. The stretching process was agonizing, as each larger plug would tear the healing tissue and force the hole to expand beyond its natural limits. The lip would become increasingly deformed as the hole grew larger, eventually creating a gaping wound that could accommodate jade plugs the size of dinner plates. The largest jade plugs were so heavy they would pull the lower lip down to the chest, stretching the tissue until it became a thin flap of skin connecting the mouth to the enormous ornament. Eating became nearly impossible, as food would fall through the hole in the lip. Speaking was reduced to unintelligible mumbling, but the ability to communicate was considered less important than the beauty of the jade ornaments. For perfect noses, they would pierce the septum with sharp thorns, then gradually stretch it to hold elaborate jade ornaments. These heavy decorations often tore through the nose, causing permanent disfigurement. The stretching process was particularly brutal, with cactus thorns used to gradually enlarge the holes. The final jade ornaments were often so heavy they required additional support wires attached to the ears. The nose-piercing ceremony used thorns from sacred ceiba trees, plants that were considered connections between the earthly and divine realms. The thorns were heated over temple fires until they glowed red hot, then driven through the cartilage of the nose while still burning. The pain was so intense that many people would lose consciousness, but they would be revived and forced to endure the completion of the piercing. The initial thorn would be left in place until the wound healed, then gradually replaced with larger thorns and eventually with jade plugs. The cartilage of the nose would be slowly destroyed as the hole expanded, often tearing completely and leaving the nose split in half. The jade ornaments that were eventually inserted were so large and heavy that they would pull the nose down toward the mouth, creating a grotesquely distorted facial profile. Support wires were often necessary to prevent the jade ornaments from tearing completely through the nose. These wires would be attached to plugs inserted through the earlobes, creating a network of golden threads that held the nose ornaments in place. The constant tension from the wires would gradually deform the entire face, pulling the features into unnatural positions that were considered divinely beautiful. Mayan hair care required washing with fermented corn mixed with human blood. This holy mixture supposedly connected them to the corn god, but mostly just made their hair sticky and attracted insects. The blood was collected from ritual sacrifices, allowed to ferment with ground corn kernels for weeks until it became a thick, putrid paste. This mixture was rubbed into the scalp and left for days, creating a hard, crusty shell that had to be scraped off with obsidian blades. The hair washing ritual was performed monthly during religious festivals when human sacrifices were conducted at the temple pyramids. The blood from sacrificial victims would be collected in sacred jade bowls and mixed with ground corn that had been blessed by priests. The mixture would be left to ferment in underground chambers for weeks, developing a putrid smell that could be detected from miles away. The fermented blood and corn mixture would be heated over sacred fires until it reached a boiling temperature that would burn the scalp on contact. Women would kneel before temple priests while the boiling mixture was poured over their heads, coating their hair and scalp in the scalding paste. The pain was excruciating, but any reaction was considered a sign of spiritual weakness. The paste would be left in the hair for days, gradually hardening into a crusty shell that trapped insects and debris. When it was finally removed, much of the hair would come with it, leaving behind patchy bald spots and severe burns. The hair that survived would be permanently stained red and would smell of rotting blood for months afterward. For skin decoration, they would cut deep grooves into their skin, then rub in bright mineral paints. These colourful designs were permanent, but the cuts often became infected, leading to death. The mineral paints contained toxic metals like mercury and lead, which slowly poisoned the wearer while creating brilliant colours that supposedly pleased the gods. The skin-cutting ceremony was performed by master artists who would use obsidian blades to carve elaborate designs across the entire body. The cuts had to be deep enough to hold the mineral paints, but not so deep as to sever major blood vessels. The artists would work for days or weeks to complete a single person, creating complex scenes that told stories of creation, warfare, and divine intervention. The mineral paints were made from ground, cinnabar, malachite, and other toxic substances that would burn the flesh when rubbed into open wounds. The mercury in cinnabar would gradually accumulate in the body, causing neurological damage and eventual death. The lead and other pigments would attack the nervous system, causing tremors and paralysis. But the colours created by these toxic minerals were so brilliant and long-lasting that they were considered worth any risk. The painted skin would glow with supernatural colours that seemed to shift and change in different lighting, marking the wearer as a living work of art dedicated to the gods. The most extreme Mayan beauty ritual involved ritual bloodletting, where they would pierce their tongues, ears and genitals with thorns and stingray spines, then let the blood drip onto sacred paper. This was considered the ultimate beauty treatment, but often led to death from blood loss. The bloodletting was performed during religious ceremonies, with elaborately dressed priests using specially consecrated thorns to pierce the most sensitive areas of the body. The blood was allowed to soak into bark paper, which was then burned to carry the offering to the gods. The bloodletting ceremonies were elaborate affairs that could last for hours, with multiple participants piercing themselves simultaneously, while thousands of worshippers watched from the temple courtyards. The thorns and stingray spines used were considered sacred, blessed by priests and sharpened to needle points that could penetrate the deepest tissues. The tongue piercing was performed by driving long thorns completely through the tongue from top to bottom, often piercing it multiple times to create a pattern of holes. The ears were pierced with stingray spines that would be left in place while the blood flowed, creating streams of red that would be collected on bark paper held below. The genital piercing was the most extreme and dangerous part of the ceremony, with thorns driven through the most sensitive areas, while the participant remained conscious and upright. The blood loss from these piercings was often fatal, but those who survived were considered to have achieved the ultimate spiritual beauty, their bodies marked by divine favour, and their blood accepted as sacred offerings to the gods. Mayan women also practiced controlled sun exposure, lying naked in the jungle heat while covered in toxic plant extracts. This supposedly gave them divine golden skin, but usually just poisoned them. The plant extracts included various jungle toxins that caused hallucinations and organ failure, but survivors claimed to have divine visions during the process. The sun exposure ritual was performed on specially constructed stone platforms in jungle clearings where the sun's rays were most intense. The women would be covered in paste made from poisonous plants, including deadly nightshade, poison ivy, and various toxic fungi that grew in the jungle undergrowth. These substances would cause immediate burning and blistering when exposed to sunlight, but they were believed to enhance the sun's transformative power. The women would lie motionless for hours under the blazing tropical sun, their skin blistering and burning while the plant toxins entered their bloodstream through the damaged tissue. Many would die from heat stroke, poisoning, or severe burns, but those who survived emerged with skin that had a golden, otherworldly glow that was considered divinely beautiful. For dental decoration, they would file teeth into sharp points, then inlay them with precious stones. These beautiful smiles supposedly showed their connection to jaguars, but made eating nearly impossible. The filing was done with rough stones while the person was held down by assistants. The teeth were filed to sharp points resembling jaguar fangs. Then precious stones like turquoise and obsidian were embedded in the enamel. The tooth filing was an elaborate ceremony performed when children reached adolescence, marking their transition from human to divine status. The filing was done with volcanic pumice stones that would gradually wear away the tooth enamel over several sessions. Each tooth had to be shaped to a precise point that would resemble the fangs of a jaguar, the sacred animal associated with royalty and divine power. The filing process would expose the tooth nerves, causing excruciating pain that would last for months as the teeth slowly died. The precious stones would then be embedded into the filed teeth using techniques similar to the jade dental implants, often causing the already weakened teeth to crack and crumble completely. The resulting jaguar teeth were considered so beautiful and spiritually powerful that the inability to eat solid food was considered a minor inconvenience. Those with jaguar teeth would live on liquid diets for the rest of their lives, but their connection to the divine jaguar spirit was considered worth any sacrifice. For the ultimate body modification, some Mayans practiced ritual bone breaking, deliberately fracturing their arm and leg bones, then allowing them to heal in twisted, unnatural positions. These deformed limbs were considered divine, resembling the twisted forms of gods depicted in their artwork. The bone breaking was performed during religious ceremonies, with priests using stone clubs to systematically fracture every major bone in the arms and legs. The bones would be allowed to heal without setting, creating limbs that were twisted and gnarled like the branches of sacred trees. The process was incredibly painful, and often resulted in permanent disability or death from infection. But those who survived were considered living representations of the twisted tree gods depicted in Mayan mythology. The wealthy practiced extreme ear modification, gradually stretching their earlobes until they could hold massive jade ornaments the size of dinner plates. The stretching process took decades and often resulted in the earlobes tearing completely, requiring surgical repair with agave fibres. The final ear ornaments were so large and heavy that they required support structures attached to the shoulders to prevent them from tearing away from the head. And for the ultimate Mayan beauty treatment, rulers would have their entire bodies covered in jade mosaic. This living artwork was incredibly beautiful, but the weight often caused spine damage, and the constant cutting required to attach the stones frequently led to fatal infections. The jade pieces were individually carved and fitted to the contours of the body, then sewn directly into the skin with gold thread. The completed mosaic transformed the ruler into a living representation of the jade-skinned maize god, but the weight of the stones often crushed the spine, and the constant infections usually led to death within months. The jade mosaic process could take years to complete, with thousands of individual jade pieces carved to fit perfectly against every curve and contour of the body. Each piece had to be surgically implanted under the skin, creating a permanent armour of green stone that covered the ruler from head to toe. The weight of the complete mosaic could exceed 100 pounds, making movement difficult and often causing the spine to collapse under the pressure. Mayan priests also practiced ritual amputation, removing fingers and toes as offerings to the gods. These missing digits were considered marks of extreme devotion and enhanced the spiritual beauty of the individual. The amputations were performed with obsidian blades during religious ceremonies, with the severed digits offered to temple gods while still bleeding. Welcome to ancient Maya, where beauty was divine and perfection meant transcending human limitations through controlled suffering, where every modification brought you closer to the gods, and every scar was a prayer written in flesh. In the jungle cities of the Maya, beauty was not merely aesthetic but cosmic, requiring the complete transformation of human form into living representations of divine power, regardless of the cost in pain, suffering, or life itself. As we drift through these ancient beauty nightmares, remember that every culture had its own definition of perfection, and every definition required sacrifice, pain, and often death. The lengths people went to for beauty throughout history make our modern beauty standards seem almost quaint. From Roman lead face paint to Chinese foot binding, from Mayan cranial modification to Indian scarification, humans have always been willing to suffer for beauty, to endure pain for perfection, and to risk death for social acceptance. These ancient beauty rituals remind us that vanity is eternal, that the desire to be beautiful transcends culture, time, and even basic survival instincts. Throughout history, people have poisoned themselves, burned themselves, cut themselves, and modified themselves in pursuit of an ideal that was often literally killing them. But perhaps most disturbing of all is how normal these practices seemed to the people performing them. They weren't considered torture or abuse. They were simply the price of beauty, the cost of fitting in, the sacrifice required to be desirable. So tonight, as you lie in your clean bed with your untouched skin and your intact teeth, remember the countless generations who suffered, bled, and died just to feel beautiful. And maybe appreciate that your biggest beauty concern is probably whether to use the expensive face mask or just splash some water on your face. The next time you complain about the pain of eyebrow plucking or the inconvenience of a skincare routine, remember the Roman women rubbing urine on their faces, the Chinese girls having their feet crushed, the Mayan children having their skulls reshaped. Beauty has always been about transformation, but throughout most of human history, that transformation came with a body count. These ancient rituals weren't beauty treatments, they were survival tests, and the fact that people willingly submitted to them generation after generation tells us something profound about the human need to belong, to be desired, to be seen as beautiful. In our modern world, we might judge these practices as barbaric, as evidence of how far we've come, but in reality they're evidence of how little we've changed. We still modify our bodies, still risk our health, still spend fortunes pursuing an ideal of beauty that's often just as artificial and impossible as it was thousands of years ago. The tools have changed, the chemicals are different, the procedures are safer, but the underlying drive remains the same. The need to transform ourselves to become something other than what we naturally are to meet someone else's definition of beautiful. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, think about those ancient women, those brave or foolish souls who painted their faces with lead, who bound their feet until bones broke, who pierced and cut and burned themselves in pursuit of an ideal that was literally killing them. They weren't so different from us. They just lived in a time when beauty came with a much higher price, and perhaps in their willingness to pay that price, they understood something about the human condition that we've forgotten. That beauty, real beauty, isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to suffer for something you believe in, even if that something is as fleeting and fragile as the reflection in a bronze mirror. And with that cheerful thought, sweet dreams. May your sleep be filled with dreams of smooth, unburned skin, intact teeth, and the simple luxury of being alive in an age where beauty doesn't require quite so much blood.